The autumn wind cut through the small Texas town like a blade, carrying with it whispers that would follow me for years. I was 62 then, living in a trailer on the outskirts of Amarillo, trying to piece together what was left of my life after my wife Sarah passed. The locals had already made up their minds about me, the strange old man who talked to himself, who collected herbs in mason jars, who seemed to know things before they happened. They called me a witch, and in a place where Sunday church was sacred and gossip was gospel, that word carried the weight of a death sentence. My days blended into one another like watercolors in the rain. I'd wake before dawn, make my coffee black and bitter, and tend to my small garden behind the trailer. The tomatoes grew despite the harsh soil, the lavender bloomed when it shouldn't have, and somehow people's ailments seemed to ease after they reluctantly accepted the herbal remedies I'd leave on their doorsteps. But gratitude and fear make strange bedfellows, and in their eyes I saw both. The trouble started when Mrs. Henderson's arthritis disappeared after she used my willow bark tea. Word spread like wildfire through the congregation at First Baptist. Then came the incident with young Tommy Martinez. His fever broke overnight after his desperate mother accepted my elderberry syrup. By the time Sheriff Williams knocked on my door, asking questions about unnatural healing, I knew my quiet life was about to shatter. The first stone hit my trailer window on a Tuesday morning in October. I was inside, grinding echinacea root, when the glass spider webbed across my kitchen. Through the fractured pane, I could see 3 teenage boys running toward Main Street, their laughter echoing like crows. This wasn't the first act of vandalism, and I knew it wouldn't be the last. The word which had been spray-painted across my mailbox the week before, and someone had scattered salt around my trailer, an old superstition meant to trap evil spirits. I swept up the glass with steady hands, though my heart hammered against my ribs. At my age, I'd learned that fear was just another emotion to acknowledge and release, like grief or anger. But loneliness, that was different. Loneliness had teeth, and it had been gnawing at me since Sarah's funeral 18 months ago. She'd been my anchor, my translator to a world that never quite understood me. Without her, I was adrift in a sea of suspicion and small-town prejudice. The phone rang as I was taping cardboard over the broken window. It was my daughter, Rebecca, calling from Dallas. Her voice carried that familiar strain of worry and embarrassment that had colored our conversations since I'd moved to Amarillo. "Dad, Mrs. Patterson from church called me again. She says people are talking. Maybe it's time you considered moving closer to us, or maybe into one of those nice senior communities." I listened to her concerns, understanding the love beneath her frustration, but how could I explain that this trailer, this patch of stubborn earth, was where I felt closest to Sarah? How could I tell her that the herbs growing in my garden seemed to whisper secrets that helped me help others, even when those others feared me for it? If you're watching this story unfold, I want you to know that sometimes the darkest chapters of our lives are just the prologue to something beautiful. Leave a comment with the word hope if you believe that redemption can find us, even in our loneliest moments. And please, subscribe to hear how this story ends, because what happened next changed everything I thought I knew about fate, music, and the healing power of human connection. The Amarillo County Fair arrived like a carnival of memories, transforming the dusty fairgrounds into a wonderland of lights, music, and the sweet smell of funnel cake. I hadn't planned to go. Public gatherings had become minefields of whispered accusations and pointed stares, but something pulled me there that evening. Perhaps the same inexplicable force that guided my hands when I mixed my herbal remedies. I kept to the shadows, moving between the game booths and food trucks, like a ghost haunting his own past. Sarah and I had come to this fair every year for the 15 years we'd lived in Texas. She'd always insisted on riding the Ferris wheel, claiming she could see all the way to Oklahoma from the top. I found myself standing before that same ride now, watching couples and families ascending into the star-scattered sky, and the loneliness hit me like a physical blow. That's when I heard the music. It drifted from the main stage like smoke, voice so pure and haunting that it seemed to reach directly into my chest and squeeze my heart. I followed the sound through the crowd, drawn by something I couldn't name. On stage stood a woman in her early 40s, her auburn hair catching, the stage lights like fire. She wore a simple sundress and cowboy boots, and when she sang, it was as if she was telling the story of every broken heart in that crowd. Her name, I learned from the banner behind her, was Melody Rivers. She wasn't famous, not yet, but she had that rare quality that separates true artists from mere performers. She sang about loss, about hope, about the kind of love that transcends death. As her voice soared over the crowd, I felt something shift inside me, like a door opening in a room I'd forgotten existed. But even in that moment of unexpected beauty, I couldn't escape who I'd become in this town. A group of women from the Methodist church stood near me, and I heard one whisper to another, "That's him, the witch. What's he doing here?" Their words cut through the music like discord, reminding me that even in a crowd of hundreds, I was utterly alone. The song ended, and Melody Rivers looked out over the crowd with eyes that seemed to see everything. For just a moment, her gaze found mine across the sea of faces, and I felt something pass between us, recognition, perhaps, or understanding. It was the kind of moment that makes you believe in magic, the real kind that has nothing to do with herbs or healing and everything to do with human connection. I should have left then, should have retreated to my trailer and my solitude, but something kept my feet planted in that dusty ground. Maybe it was the way she'd looked at me, without fear or judgment, just curiosity. Or maybe it was the realization that I'd been holding my breath for 18 months, and her music had finally reminded me how to breathe. You know, friends, sometimes life gives us exactly what we need when we least expect it. The best part of this story is still coming, and I promise you won't want to miss what happens when two broken souls find each other in the most unlikely circumstances. Please hit that subscribe button. This tale of redemption and unexpected love is just getting started. As Melody began her next song, a ballad about second chances, I noticed something troubling. A group of young men had gathered near the stage, and their body language spoke of mischief. I recognized two of them, the Henderson boy and his friend Jake Morrison, both known for their weekend drinking and Monday morning repentance. They were passing something between them, and the way they kept glancing at the stage made my stomach tighten with apprehension. The song was building to its crescendo when it happened. A beer bottle flew through the air, missing Melody's head by inches and shattering against the backdrop. The music stopped abruptly, and the crowd gasped in collective shock. Melody stood frozen for a moment, her hand still gripping the microphone, her face pale in the stage lights. Chaos erupted around the stage. Security guards rushed toward the group of young men, but they'd already melted into the crowd like shadows. Melody tried to continue, her voice shaking as she attempted to start the song again. But another bottle flew from a different direction. This one struck the amplifier, sending a screech of feedback across the fairgrounds that made everyone cover their ears. I watched in horror as this beautiful moment dissolved into ugliness. The crowd began to disperse, parents pulling their children away from the potential violence, teenagers laughing and recording everything on their phones. Melody stood alone on that stage, abandoned by the very people who'd been swaying to her music moments before. Something inside me snapped. Maybe it was seeing another outsider being treated with the same cruelty I'd endured. Or maybe it was the memory of Sarah's voice telling me that good people don't stand by when others are hurting. Whatever it was, I found myself pushing through the crowd toward the stage. "Miss Rivers," I called out, my voice carrying over the din. She looked down at me, this strange old man with wild gray hair and clothes that smelled of herbs and loneliness. "Don't let them win. Keep singing." She stared at me for a long moment, and I saw something shift in her expression. The fear was still there, but underneath it was a spark of defiance that reminded me of Sarah. Slowly, she raised the microphone to her lips again. "This next song," she said, her voice stronger now, "is for everyone who's ever felt like they didn't belong." And she began to sing a cappella, without the damaged amplifier, her voice pure and clear in the night air. One by one, people stopped. Leaving, they turned back toward the stage, drawn by the raw emotion in her voice. Even some of the troublemakers paused, caught off guard by her courage. I stood at the foot of the stage, this old man they called a witch, and for the first time in months, I didn't feel alone. When the song ended, the applause was thunderous. Melody had transformed a moment of cruelty into something transcendent, and the crowd knew they'd witnessed something special. As people began to disperse, talking excitedly about what they'd just experienced, I found myself lingering near the stage. That Melody was packing up her guitar, her hands still trembling slightly from the adrenaline. I approached slowly, not wanting to startle her. "That was beautiful," I said simply. "What you did up there, that took real courage." She looked up at me, and I saw tears glistening in her eyes. "Thank you," she said, for what you said. I was about to run, and then I heard your voice, and something just ... clicked. We stood there in the fading lights of the fair, two strangers who'd found each other in a moment of crisis. I wanted to say more, to tell her about the loneliness and the accusations, about how her music had reached something in me that I'd thought was dead, but the words stuck in my throat, held back by years of isolation and mistrust. "I'm Henry," I finally managed. "Henry Blackwood, Melody Rivers," she replied, extending her hand. When our fingers touched, I felt a jolt of recognition, as if I'd been waiting my whole life for this handshake. "I know who you are," she said quietly. "People talk in small towns. They say you're—" She paused, searching for the right words. "A witch," I finished for her. "Yes, I've heard." She studied my face in the dim light. "Are you?" The question hung between us like a bridge waiting to be crossed. I could have laughed it off, could have given her the rational explanation about herbal medicine and coincidence. Instead, I found myself telling the truth. "I don't know what I am," I said. "I just know that sometimes I can help people, and that scares them more than it comforts them." Melody nodded slowly, as if my answer made perfect sense to her. "I understand," she said. "Music does the same thing for me. Sometimes I sing things I didn't know I knew, and people hear things I didn't know I was saying. It's like there's something moving through me that's bigger than I am." We walked together toward the parking area, our conversation flowing as naturally as water finding its course. He told me about her struggles as an independent artist, about the record labels that wanted to change her sound, about the loneliness of performing for crowds who didn't really see her. I found myself sharing things I hadn't spoken aloud since Sarah's death, about the herbs that seemed to choose their own purposes, about the dreams that sometimes showed me things before they happened, about the crushing weight of being misunderstood. "Where are you staying?" I asked as we reached her car. An old Honda Civic with a guitar case strapped to the roof. "The Motel 6 on Route 40, she said. "It's not much, but it's what I can afford." I hesitated, knowing that what I was about to say would either deepen our connection or send her running. "I have a spare room," I said. "It's not fancy, just a trailer on the edge of town. But it's clean, and it's quiet, and you wouldn't have to worry about anyone bothering you." She looked at me for a long moment, and I could see her weighing the risks. Here was a man she'd just met, someone the whole town whispered about, offering her shelter. By all logic, she should have politely declined and driven away. "Okay," she said simply. "I'd like that." As I led her through the dark streets of Amarillo to my trailer, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Hope. Not the desperate kind that clings to impossible dreams, but the quiet, steady kind that believes in tomorrow. My trailer looked different through Melody's eyes. I saw it as she must have, the herb garden that had grown wild and mysterious in the moonlight, the wind chimes Sarah had hung that still sang their gentle songs, the warm light spilling from the windows onto the dusty ground. It wasn't much, but it was home, and for the first time since Sarah's death, I wasn't ashamed of it. "It's beautiful," Melody said, and I could tell she meant it. She walked through my small garden, touching the lavender and rosemary with gentle fingers. "These plants, they're so healthy. How do you get them to grow like this in such harsh soil?" "I talk to them," I said, then immediately felt foolish for admitting it. But Melody just nodded, as if this was the most natural thing in the world. "I talk to my guitar," she said. "Sometimes I swear it talks back." Inside, I showed her to the spare room, Sarah's old sewing room that I'd barely touched since she passed. It still smelled faintly of her perfume, and I had to steady myself against the doorframe as the memories washed over me. "This was my wife's room," I said quietly. "She died 18 months ago. Cancer." Melody's hand found my arm, a gentle touch that somehow conveyed more comfort than 1,000 words. "She had good taste," she said, looking around at Sarah's carefully chosen fabrics and the half-finished quilt, still stretched on its frame. "I can feel her love in this room." That night, as I lay in my own bed listening to the sounds of another person moving through my home, I felt something shift in the very foundations of my world. For months, I'd been existing rather than living, going through the motions of each day without purpose or joy. But Melody's presence had awakened something in me, a reminder that life could still hold surprises, still offer connections that transcended the ordinary. I woke before dawn, as was my habit, and found Melody already up, sitting on my small porch, with a cup of coffee and her guitar. She was playing softly, a melody I didn't recognize, her voice barely above a whisper. The song seemed to blend with the morning sounds, the distant lowing of cattle, the rustle of wind through the mesquite trees, the gentle chiming of Sarah's wind chimes. "Good morning," I said, settling into the chair beside her. "That's a beautiful song. It came to me in a dream," she said, her fingers still moving across the strings. "Sometimes that happens. I wake up with music in my head that I've never heard before." We sat in comfortable silence as the sun painted the eastern sky in shades of pink and gold. I found myself studying her profile, the way the morning light caught in her hair, the peaceful expression on her face as she played. There was something timeless about the moment, as if we'd sat like this 1,000 mornings before. "Henry," she said suddenly, "what really happened to your wife?" The question caught me off guard, not because it was intrusive, but because of the way she asked it, with genuine care and a kind of knowing that suggested she already suspected the answer wasn't simple. "The doctors said it was pancreatic cancer," I began, my voice rough with old pain. But I knew something was wrong months before they found it. I could see it in her aura, feel it in the way her energy changed. I tried everything conventional, medicine, alternative treatments, every herb and remedy I could find. Nothing worked. I paused, remembering those final weeks when Sarah had grown so thin and pale, when her beautiful laugh had been replaced by labored breathing and whispered words of love. "The night she died," I continued, "something strange happened. I was holding her hand, and suddenly the room filled with this incredible light. Not electric light, something else, something warm and golden." Sarah opened her eyes and looked at something I couldn't see, and she smiled, really smiled, for the first time in weeks. Then she squeezed my hand and said, "Take care of the garden, Henry. Someone's coming who'll need what you grow." Melody had stopped playing, her guitar resting silent in her lap as she listened to my story. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment, and I wondered if I'd shared too much, if I'd frightened her with talk of lights and final words that sounded like prophecy. "She was talking about me," Melody said finally, her voice soft with wonder, "wasn't she?" The certainty in her voice sent a chill down my spine, not of fear but of recognition. "I think she might have been," I admitted. "Sarah always said she could see things others couldn't. I used to tease her about it, but after she died, I started to wonder if maybe we're all more connected than we realize." Melody set down her guitar and turned to face me fully. "Henry, I need to tell you something. Last night, I had the most vivid dream. I was standing in a garden, your garden, and there was a woman there. She had silver hair and kind eyes, and she was tending to the herbs. She looked at me and said, 'Help him remember how to live.' When I woke up, I could still smell lavender." The hair on my arms stood up as she spoke. Sarah had always worn lavender perfume, and her hair had turned silver in the years before her death. The idea that she might somehow be orchestrating this meeting from beyond seemed impossible, and yet perfectly natural at the same time. "What do you think it means?" I asked. "I think," Melody said, reaching for my weathered hand with her smooth one, "that some connections transcend death. And I think your wife knew you'd need a friend." As if summoned by our conversation, a mockingbird landed on the porch railing and began to sing. But this wasn't the usual chaotic medley of stolen songs that mockingbirds are known for. Instead, it sang a single, pure melody, the same tune Melody had been playing on her guitar moments before. We stared at the bird in amazement as it repeated the melody 3 times, then flew away toward the rising sun. In the silence that followed, I felt Sarah's presence as clearly as if she was sitting beside us, and I knew that whatever was happening between Melody and me was part of something larger than either of us could understand. The days that followed took on a rhythm I hadn't experienced since Sarah's illness began. Melody would wake early and join me in the garden, learning the names and properties of the plants, while I learned the stories behind her songs. She had a natural intuition for the herbs, seeming to know instinctively which ones were ready for harvest and which needed more time to mature. In the evenings, she would play her guitar on the porch while I prepared simple dinners from vegetables we'd grown ourselves. The music drew neighbors' cats and the occasional curious deer, creating an audience that appreciated her art without judgment or fear. For the first time since moving to Amarillo, I felt like I belonged somewhere, but the outside world hadn't forgotten about either of us. Word had spread quickly through town about the strange woman staying with the witch, and the whispers grew louder and more creative with each telling. Some said I'd enchanted her with love potions. Others claimed she was a witch herself, drawn to Amarillo by dark forces. The most creative gossip suggested we were planning some kind of occult ritual for Halloween, which was still weeks away. The harassment escalated gradually. First came the phone calls, heavy breathing and whispered threats that made Melody jump every time the phone rang. Then someone threw eggs at my trailer, leaving yellow stains on the aluminum siding that I scrubbed away, while muttering curses that probably weren't helping my reputation. The breaking point came on a Thursday morning when we found my herb garden destroyed. Someone had come in the night and trampled the carefully tended beds, uprooting plants that had taken years to establish and scattering my drying herbs to the wind. The lavender Sarah had planted with her own hands lay broken and wilting in the dust. I stood among the ruins of my garden, feeling something die inside me. These plants weren't just my livelihood, they were my connection to Sarah, my way of helping others, my proof that beauty could grow in harsh places. Without them, I was just a crazy old man living in a trailer. Exactly what the town had always believed me to be. Melody found me sitting in the wreckage of the garden, holding a broken lavender stem and crying for the first time since Sarah's funeral. She didn't say anything at first, just sat beside me in the dirt and let me grieve. When the tears finally stopped, she spoke quietly. "We can replant," she said. "Gardens are resilient. They come back stronger after they've been broken." "It's not just the plants," I said, my voice hoarse with emotion. "It's everything, Sarah. The loneliness, the way people look at me like I'm some kind of monster. I'm tired, Melody. I'm so damn tired of fighting." She was quiet for a moment, then began to hum softly. The melody was one I'd never heard before, but it seemed to wrap around my grief like a gentle embrace. Gradually, the humming became words, a song about resilience, about finding strength in broken places, about the way love persists, even after loss. As she sang, something miraculous happened. The broken lavender stem in my hands began to straighten, its crushed leaves unfurling as if responding to her voice. I blinked, certain I was imagining things, but the plant continued to heal itself, growing stronger and more vibrant with each note. "Melody," I whispered, but she was lost in the song. Now, her eyes closed and her face tilted toward the sky. Around us, other damaged plants began to respond, stems straightening, leaves uncurling, roots finding purchase in the disturbed soil. It was as if her music was calling them back to life. When the song ended, we sat in stunned silence, surrounded by a garden that looked better than it had before the destruction. The plants weren't just healed, they were thriving, more lush and vibrant than I'd ever seen them. "How?" I asked, but Melody looked as shocked as I felt. "I don't know," she said, staring at her hands as if they belonged to someone else. "I've never... That's never happened before." Word of the garden's miraculous recovery spread through Amarillo faster than wildfire. By afternoon, cars were driving slowly past my trailer, their occupants craning their necks to see the impossible sight of plants that had been destroyed at dawn now flourishing in the afternoon sun. Some people parked and walked to the edge of my property, taking pictures and videos that would soon flood social media with theories and speculation. The attention was overwhelming and frightening. I'd spent months trying to avoid notice, and now I was the center of a phenomenon that defied explanation. Melody and I retreated inside the trailer, watching through the windows as the crowd grew larger and more agitated. "This is my fault," Melody said, pacing the small living room like a caged animal. "I should never have sung that song. I should never have come here." "No," I said firmly. "This isn't your fault. If anything, it's mine for being what I am, for attracting this kind of attention." "What are we?" she asked, stopping her pacing to look at me directly. "Because I'm starting to think we're not entirely human." The question hung between us like a challenge. I'd been asking myself the same thing for years, especially since Sarah's death, when my abilities had seemed to grow stronger and more unpredictable. The herbs responded to my touch in ways that couldn't be explained by conventional botany. I could sense illness in people before symptoms appeared. Sometimes I dreamed of things that later came true. "I think," I said slowly, "that we're exactly what we're supposed to be. Different, maybe, but not wrong." A knock at the door interrupted our conversation. Through the window, I could see Sheriff Williams standing on my porch, his expression grim. Behind him, the crowd had grown to nearly 50 people, some holding signs that read "Witchcraft is real," and others demanding scientific explanation. Sheriff Williams was a decent man caught in an impossible situation. He'd known me for 3 years, had even quietly accepted some of my herbal remedies for his wife's migraines. But the crowd outside was demanding action he couldn't legally take. "Henry," he said, when I opened the door, "I need you and Miss Rivers to come with me. For your own safety." "Are we under arrest?" Melody asked, stepping up beside me. "No, ma'am, but there are some folks out here getting pretty worked up, and I'd rather have you somewhere safe while things cool down." I looked past him at the crowd, recognizing faces from the grocery store, the post office, the church. These were people I'd lived among for years, people whose children I'd helped heal, whose gardens had benefited from my advice. Now they looked at me with a mixture of fear and fascination that made my stomach turn. "Where would you take us?" I asked. "County jail has holding cells. They're not comfortable, but they're secure." The irony wasn't lost on me, seeking safety in a jail cell from people who should have been my neighbors. But as I watched the crowd grow more agitated, I realized we had little choice. "Give us 5 minutes to pack some things," I said. As we gathered our belongings, Melody grabbed her guitar and I filled a small bag with essential herbs. Through the window, I could see people trampling through my garden again, this time not to destroy but to collect samples of the miraculously healed plants. Someone was digging up entire root systems while others plucked leaves and flowers, as if my garden was some kind of magical pharmacy they could raid. "They're going to destroy it again," I said, watching years of careful cultivation being undone by greedy hands. "No," Melody said, her voice carrying a strange certainty. "They won't be able to take what matters. The real magic isn't in the plants themselves." The county jail was a squat brick building that smelled of disinfectant and despair. Sheriff Williams led us to a holding area with 2 cells, their doors standing open in a gesture of hospitality that didn't quite mask the reality of our situation. We were prisoners of our own strangeness, locked away for the crime of being different. "I'll bring you some dinner later," the sheriff said, his voice apologetic. "And I'll try to keep the reporters away, but I can't promise anything. This story has already hit the internet." After he left, Melody and I sat on the narrow cots and tried to process what our lives had become in the span of a few hours. The woman who'd been performing at county fairs just days ago was now a viral sensation. Her healing song viewed millions of times on platforms around the world. The old man who'd wanted nothing more than to tend his garden in peace was being called everything from a miracle worker to a dangerous cult leader. "I keep thinking about what your wife said," Melody murmured, tuning her guitar in the echoing space, "about someone coming who would need what you grow. Maybe she didn't just mean the herbs." "What do you mean?" "Maybe she meant the knowledge, the understanding, the acceptance of things that can't be explained." Melody strummed a soft chord that seemed to warm the cold air around us. "Maybe we're supposed to help people see that magic isn't something to fear by sitting in a jail cell." She smiled, the first genuine smile I'd seen from her since the morning's chaos. "By being exactly who we are, wherever we are." And then she began to sing, not the healing song that had restored my garden, but something new, something that seemed to rise from the very foundations of the building. Her voice echoed off the concrete walls and steel bars, transforming our prison into a cathedral of sound. The song Melody sang in that jail cell was unlike anything I'd ever heard. It wasn't just music, it was a story, a prayer, a declaration of hope that seemed to seep through the walls and reach every corner of the building. Within minutes, I could hear movement in the corridors as guards and other prisoners were drawn to the sound. Deputy Martinez appeared at our cell door, his usual stern expression replaced by wonder. "Ma'am," he said quietly, "that's the most beautiful thing I've ever heard." Soon, others joined him. Sheriff Williams returned with his wife, who suffered from the chronic pain that my herbs had helped ease. 2 other prisoners from the drunk tank stood at the bars of their own cells, tears streaming down their faces as Melody's voice washed over them. Even the dispatcher from the front desk had abandoned her post to listen. The song seemed to last forever and no time at all. When it finally ended, the silence that followed was profound and sacred. In that moment, surrounded by concrete and steel, we had created something transcendent. "Miss Rivers," Sheriff Williams said, his voice thick with emotion, "I don't know what you and Henry are, but I know you're not dangerous. Not to anyone but ignorance and fear." He unlocked our cell door. "You're free to go, but I'd recommend staying somewhere else tonight. The crowd outside has grown, and not all of them are friendly. As we gathered our things, Deputy Martinez approached me hesitantly. "Mr. Blackwood," he said, "my daughter has been having nightmares since her mother died last year. The doctors say it's normal grief, but do you think your herbs might help?" It was the first time in months that someone had asked for my help without fear or shame. I reached into my bag and pulled out a small sachet of chamomile and lavender. "Brew this into a tea before bedtime," I said, "and tell her that her mother's love is still with her, just in a different form." We left the jail through the back entrance, avoiding the crowd of reporters and curiosity seekers that had gathered at the front. Sheriff Williams had arranged for us to stay at his brother's ranch outside of town, a place where we could find some peace while the media frenzy died down. The ranch was everything my trailer wasn't: spacious, quiet, surrounded by rolling hills and endless sky. Tom Williams, the sheriff's brother, was a man of few words, who asked no questions and offered simple hospitality. He showed us to a guest house near a small pond, where the only sounds were wind through the cottonwoods and the distant lowing of cattle. "Stay as long as you need," he said simply. "Anyone who can make my brother cry with a song is welcome here." That night, as we sat by the pond watching stars reflect in the still water, Melody and I talked about what came next. The world knew about us now. There was no going back to anonymity. Videos of the garden's healing and audio recordings of Melody's jail cell performance were spreading across the internet, spawning theories that ranged from divine intervention to elaborate hoax. "I've been thinking about what you said," I told her, "about helping people see that magic isn't something to fear. Maybe that's exactly what we're supposed to do." "How?" "By sharing our gifts openly. By showing people that healing, whether it comes from herbs or music or simple human kindness, is something to celebrate, not condemn." Melody picked up her guitar and played a few soft chords. "It won't be easy. There will always be people who prefer fear to wonder. Sarah used to say that courage isn't the absence of fear, it's doing what's right despite the fear." I looked up at the stars, feeling her presence in the vastness of the night sky. I think she'd want us to be brave. The next morning brought unexpected visitors. A black sedan pulled up to the ranch house, and two people emerged, a woman in an expensive suit and a man carrying professional camera equipment. My first instinct was to hide, assuming they were reporters looking for an exclusive story. But Tom Williams met them at the gate and, after a brief conversation, walked them to our guest house. "These folks aren't reporters," he said. "They're from Nashville." The woman introduced herself as Rebecca Stone, a talent scout for one of the major record labels. The man was her assistant, there to document what she called a potential once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. "Miss Rivers," Rebecca said, her voice carrying the polished enthusiasm of someone accustomed to making dreams come true. "Your performance at the county fair has been viewed over 10 million times. The jail cell recording has been shared by everyone from country music stars to spiritual leaders. We'd like to offer you a recording contract." Melody looked stunned. This was what she'd been working toward for years: recognition, a chance to share her music with the world, financial security. But I could see the conflict in her eyes as she glanced between Rebecca and me. "What about Henry?" she asked. "We're a team now." Rebecca's smile faltered slightly. "Mr. Blackwood's story is certainly ... interesting, but the music industry is about marketable talent, and frankly, his association with unusual phenomena might complicate things." The dismissal stung, but I understood the business reality. Record labels wanted artists they could package and promote, not complicated stories about healing herbs and miraculous gardens. "I appreciate the offer," Melody said carefully, "but I need time to think about it." After Rebecca and her assistant left, promising to keep the offer open for a week, Melody and I sat in heavy silence. The opportunity she'd dreamed of was within reach, but accepting it would mean leaving behind the connection we'd discovered, the partnership that had awakened abilities neither of us fully understood. That evening, as we walked along the ranch's fence line, Melody finally spoke about the decision weighing on her heart. "I've wanted this my whole life," she said. "A record deal, a chance to reach people with my music, financial stability. But now that it's here, all I can think about is what I'd be giving up." "You wouldn't be giving up anything," I said, though the words felt like glass in my throat. "This is your chance, Melody. You have to take it." She stopped walking and turned to face me. "What if I don't want to take it?" What if what we have here is more important than fame or money? What we have here is beautiful, I admitted, but it's not sustainable. The world won't leave us alone now. We'll always be curiosities, freaks to be studied and exploited. At least with a record deal, you'd have some control over your story. Our story, she corrected. Henry, don't you see? What happened in your garden? What happens when we're together? It's not just my gift or your gift. It's something we create together. As if to prove her point, the evening air around us began to shimmer with an almost visible energy. The grass at our feet grew greener, the flowers along the fence bloomed more vibrantly, and somewhere in the distance, a meadowlark began to sing a melody that perfectly complemented the rhythm of our conversation. The record label wants to separate us because they don't understand what we are together, Melody continued. But maybe that's exactly why we need to stay together. Maybe we're supposed to show the world that magic is real, that healing is possible, that there's more to existence than what we can measure and market. I wanted to argue, to insist that she take the practical path, the safe path. But looking at her face in the fading light, seeing the determination and hope shining in her eyes, I realized that she was right. What we had discovered together was too precious to sacrifice for conventional success. The decision to turn down the record deal wasn't easy, but it felt right in a way that transcended logic. When Rebecca Stone called the next day, Melody's voice was steady and sure as she declined the offer. I appreciate the opportunity, she said, but I've found something more valuable than a recording contract. I've found my purpose. Rebecca's response was predictably professional and slightly condescending. Miss Rivers, opportunities like this don't come along often. Are you sure you want to throw away your career for whatever this is? I'm not throwing away my career, Melody replied. I'm choosing a different path. After the call ended, we began planning that different path. If the traditional music industry wouldn't accept us as we were, we'd create our own platform. Tom Williams helped us set up a simple recording studio in his barn, using equipment borrowed from the local high school and acoustic properties that turned out to be surprisingly good. Our first official recording was the healing song that had restored my garden, but this time we performed it together, Melody's voice carrying the melody while I provided harmonic support and played a simple wooden flute I'd carved from a branch of Sarah's favorite oak tree. The combination of our voices and the natural acoustics of the barn created something that was both earthly and ethereal. We uploaded the recording to every platform we could find, along with a simple video showing us performing in the barn surrounded by thriving plants and gentle animals drawn by the music. Within hours, it had thousands of views. Within days, millions. But more importantly, the comments and messages we received weren't just about entertainment. People wrote about feeling healed by the music, about finding hope in dark times, about experiencing something they couldn't name but desperately needed. A woman in Oregon said the song had helped her through chemotherapy. A man in Florida claimed it had saved his marriage. A teenager in Maine wrote that it had talked her out of suicide. As our unconventional career grew, so did the challenges. Religious groups denounced us as false prophets. Scientists demanded we submit to testing to prove our abilities were real. Skeptics created elaborate theories about how we faked everything. But for every voice of criticism, there were 10 voices of gratitude from people whose lives had been touched by our music. We began traveling, not to concert halls and recording studios, but to hospitals, nursing homes, and community centers. We performed for cancer patients and grieving families, for veterans struggling with PTSD, and children facing their own mortality. Each performance was different, each song tailored to the specific needs of our audience. In a children's hospital in Denver, Melody sang lullabies that seemed to ease pain better than morphine. At a veterans center in Phoenix, I shared herbal remedies while she performed songs about coming home and finding peace. In a nursing home in Little Rock, we helped elderly residents remember songs from their youth, watching as music unlocked memories that dementia had hidden away. The medical establishment began to take notice. Dr. Sarah Chen, a researcher at Johns Hopkins, invited us to participate in a study on the therapeutic effects of music and plant-based medicine. Unlike the skeptics who wanted to debunk us, Dr. Chen approached our work with genuine scientific curiosity. I don't need to understand how it works to document that it does work, she told us during our first meeting. If your methods are helping people heal, then they deserve serious study, not dismissal. The research that followed was rigorous and revealing. Brain scans showed that our music activated healing responses in ways that conventional therapy couldn't match. Blood tests revealed that patients exposed to my herbal treatments showed improved immune function and reduced inflammation. Most remarkably, the combination of music and plant medicine seemed to create synergistic effects that were greater than the sum of their parts. As I stand here now, 5 years later, I can hardly believe the journey that began with a broken window and a country fair. Melody and I have traveled to 6 continents, sharing our gifts with anyone who needs them. We've been studied by scientists, blessed by spiritual leaders, and criticized by those who fear what they can't understand. But most importantly, we've helped people heal, not just their bodies, but their spirits, their relationships, their connection to the natural world and to each other. We've shown that magic isn't something to fear, it's something to celebrate, to nurture, to share with anyone brave enough to believe. The trailer in Amarillo is gone now, replaced by a healing center that welcomes visitors from around the world. The garden has grown into something magnificent, tended by volunteers who've learned that plants respond to love as much as water and sunlight. Sarah's wind chimes still sing in the breeze, and sometimes, when the light is just right, I swear, I can see her smiling among the lavender she planted with her own hands. Melody and I never married in the conventional sense, but we're bound by something deeper than legal documents, a shared purpose, a mutual understanding, a love that encompasses not just each other, but everyone whose life we've been privileged to touch. She still performs, but now her concerts are healing ceremonies, her songs are prayers, and her audience is anyone who needs to remember that miracles are possible. They called me a witch in Texas, and maybe they were right. But if being a witch means using whatever gifts you have to help others heal, to bring beauty into a broken world, to show people that love is stronger than fear, then I'm proud to wear that label. The country singer who saved me didn't just change my fate, she helped me understand it. Together, we've learned that the most powerful magic isn't in herbs or music or mysterious abilities. It's in the courage to be exactly who you are, to share your gifts without shame, and to believe that even in the darkest times, healing is always possible. What do you think about this journey from isolation to purpose, from fear to love? Have you ever experienced something that couldn't be explained but changed your life anyway? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear your own stories of unexpected magic and healing. And please, subscribe to this channel for more true stories of hope, transformation, and the extraordinary power of human connection. Until next time, remember that your own gifts, whatever they may be, are needed in this world. Don't let fear keep you from sharing them.